Okay, so let's finish. I was almost done with Jacob, the enterprising employee, chapters 30 and 31, and we ran out of time. So let's quickly mention one other thing about Laban and Jacob as they split up. Look at chapter 31, verse 49. Genesis chapter 31, verse 49. I'll mention one other thing and then we'll pray and move on to the new material. Genesis 31:49 here. As Jacob and Laban make this treaty to split up, this is not a nice, pretty thing here. Verse 49. They have a heap between them as a witness. Verse 49. They name it Mizpah, or Gilead, and Mizpah, for he said, the Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent one from another. Okay, so I've seen that sign put on doorways, on rugs at the entrance to a house. The Lord watch between me and thee. And different places. I've seen it on cards and signs and so on like that. That is not at all what that was intended to mean. This was not a pretty, nice, I'm glad we're friends. May the Lord watch between me and you. This is drawing a line and saying, Laban, you don't cross this line and come to me. I won't cross this line and come to you. If any of us crosses, it's an act of war, pretty much. They're drawing the line. Look at the next verse. If thou shalt afflict my daughters, or if thou shalt take other wives besides my daughters, no man is with us. See, God is witness betwixt me and thee. If you do this, there's nothing else. The Lord is a witness. So what it's literally saying is, if you do this, God's my witness. I'm free from crossing. I can cross the line then if you break your side of the deal. So this is not a nice, friendly parting. This is very much drawing a line. You stay on your side, I'll stay on my side. Read about any commentary on that and you'll see that that's pretty much what they all come to the conclusion on. Verse 52, this heap be witness and this pillar be witness that I will not pass over this heap to thee, and that thou shalt not pass over this heap and this pillar unto me for harm. Okay, so they split up, and by the way, it's not all bad. Jacob is staying on his sideline. He's going to have his own family. He's going to live his own life. It's a little different than we have it today, where it's a lot easier to commute back and forth and see family and so on. In those days, Rebekah obviously never went back home. Isaac's wife, Rebekah, she never went back home. She never saw her brother Laban again. She never saw her parents again. Once they split up and moved away, they had moved away for permanent. And that's what we find here. Stay out of my space, I'll stay out of yours. Okay, so that's the enterprising employee. Now we come to the next section of Jacob going on his way. And we'll call this the determined wrestler. Jacob, the determined wrestler. So let's pray. And we'll move into this new section. Thank you, Lord, for the day. Help us as we look at these things today to learn from the life of Jacob. Lord, what a deceiver, what a trickster, what a person, Lord, who in the end, though, realized that he was going to reap all the things that he sowed. And he did. And Lord, help us to realize this as well. Help us to learn the lessons from the life of Jacob that we should. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, so we're going to look at Jacob as the determined wrestler, chapters 32 and 33. We'll make note of a couple of things. I brought with me today my map. I've used this map a lot. I really like it because it shows the topography of the land. And I was just looking again at some things. I really believe in studying Bible geography because it gives you a better idea of what's going on in so many ways. And when you can actually see how rugged this area was. This is Mahanaim. See this big, what do you call it? Canyons, Really, what'd you say?
I said divot.
The divot? It's a little more than that. So big canyons, mountains, plateaus, big drop-offs down into the Jordan Valley and so on. Anyway, but this is the place where he met him. Oh, I'm sorry. Whoa, I'm looking at the wrong place. I'm looking at the Dead Sea. It was up here. Still the same idea, very rugged. And so that's where Jacob meets with the Lord first and then with Esau. Look at chapter 32, verse 1. Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's host." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. Now, what just happened there? He meets angels. Guardian angels? I don't know what you want to call it, but the first thing we see here under the determined wrestler is that Jacob is ministered to by angels. These angels, this is not just as, let's see here. When Jesus was born, the angels appeared to the shepherds, and those angels sang. Okay, there's different purposes for different angels. And in that case, those were the singing or the musical angels. It's not the case here. These are the armies of heaven. By the way, Genesis is the book of firsts. This is the first mention of the armies of heaven. First mention of angels as an army. How do we see that? In verse 2, this is God's host. That word host is a military term. So these are the armies of heaven. The name of that place was Mahanaim. Mahanaim literally means the host of God or something along those lines. Okay, so the host, the armies. This is the first of many times we see in the book of Joshua, chapter 5, that Joshua was visited by the captain of the host of God's army. That was Jesus Christ. An Old Testament appearance of Christ in the book of Joshua. Can you think of some others other places in Scripture where the armies of heaven are mentioned? Trevor.
Elisha and his servant.
Very good. Very good. They saw the armies of heaven surrounding them. Anyone else? There's a very common one, but it's in the New Testament, having to do with Christ himself. Rick?
His ability to call down.
Yes. Christ could have called 10,000 angels to destroy the world and set him free, right? Isn't that how the song goes? So there's another mention of Christ. He could have called. By the way, Psalm 34:7 says, this is David writing, "The angel of the Lord encampeth round about them that fear him and delivereth them." The angel of the Lord. That's the protection of God through the angel. Of course, I believe that's in reference to, if we want to call it, a guardian angel. All right, so he's ministered to by the angels. Then he's met by Esau. He's met by Esau. Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom. "I'm coming back, Esau. I have my family, and I have a whole lot of animals and herds and flocks. And we're coming back into the land, and that's about the extent I have sent to tell my Lord," verse 5, "that I may find grace in thy sight." I'm wondering if we can make peace. That's what he's asking for. He's asking for peace between him and his brother. And the messengers returned to Jacob saying, "Hey, we found Esau and he's coming to meet you, and he has 400 men with him." Now, being here in this rugged land, there's not many places that Jacob can go. He can't go to a city for protection. There's no walled cities real close by, especially that he has good relations with. And so there's nowhere for him to go. And he finds out that Esau is coming with 400 men. There's only one reason that Esau would have 400 men with him. Not women and children. You can obviously, this is a war party. Esau is coming to say, Jacob, probably he's coming with the intent to get revenge. And when he sees what Jacob is doing, God changes his heart, I believe. He didn't come to make peace. I don't believe that. I don't think that was his original intention. You don't come to make peace unless, a peace through strength type thing. He's showing his force. So 400 men, and Jacob is absolutely petrified. He's absolutely shaken to his roots he believes, and for a good reason, that he's going to die, and his whole family with him. Oh, by the way, and I didn't mention here, I forgot, with the angels, the host of God, the angels showing up to Jacob, obviously this was to show Jacob that he was protected. Wherever you're going, the angels of God are around you and protecting you. And the next thing that happens, Jacob right away loses sight of that. He forgets that, yes, Esau is coming with 400, but he has on his side an invisible army of angels. So, but he forgets that quick. So anyway, it sounds familiar to us too, right? That we forget what God does very quickly, day to day. So anyway, Jacob does a couple things in his preparation for meeting up with Esau. First, he splits up his family. His household, into several groups. Chapter 32, verse 8 says, if Esau come to the one company and smite it, then the other company which is left shall escape. So he divides his household into two groups at least at that point. And then he also does something else. He cries out to God in prayer. Find this in verse 9. Jacob said, "O God of my..." When you're in trouble, it's easy to pray. Boy, you can get real nice and eloquent too, right? "O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac." He's almost 100 years old now, and so he's finally gotten serious about life. He's learning how to pray finally. "The Lord which says to me, return unto thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which thou hast shown unto thy servant." You got that right. "For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am become two bands. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau. For I fear him, lest he will come and smite me, and the mother with the children." So he's reminding God, "God, you told me to come back here." It's a good prayer to pray. When you can pray to God what he already promised, I believe God honors his word. He honors his promise. And so Jacob prays this promise back to God. But he still takes a couple other precautions. All right, of course, as he prays out to God, God sends, or God actually comes down in the form of Jesus Christ, a wrestler. Verse 24, Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. And you know the story. It is Jesus himself. Jacob admits that. He names the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face. He actually saw God, Jesus Christ, and he knew that, and God humbled him there. Touched his thigh, and the joint, or the muscle inside his thigh, it shrunk. And if you have that, or if you know someone, I know someone who limps, and if you have that, obviously it actually shrinks. One leg is shorter than the other. And we don't have lots of mountains around here to walk on, where you can have one leg shorter than the other. You ever heard that before? And this man I know that has literally one leg. His one shoe has a sole on it about that thick. Be an easy way to fix that. But Jacob here has that thigh, the sinew, shrunk for the rest of his life. But that's not all that happens. It's not just a physical thing that happens to Jacob. It's spiritual as well. And so let's see what God does to Jacob. Jesus said, "Let me go, for the day breaketh." And Jacob said, "I will not let thee go, except thou bless me." And he said unto him, here's the angel, here's Jesus Christ, and he said unto him, "What is thy name?" Now I'm sure, as you are, that God knew Jacob's name. But he asked him to admit it. "What is your name? What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Jacob. I'm sure as he's saying that, you got to understand, name meanings in the Hebrew, they mean a lot. my name, how do you find a meaning for Uriah? Uriah means light of God, so I guess that's about as close as you. But we don't put a lot of emphasis in name meanings. But Jacob means heel tripper, supplanter, deceiver. Sorry, Jacob. So, Jake, what is your name? Can you picture Jacob here? He just drops his head. Heel tripper, supplanter. That's my name. I'm a deceiver. Well, good. What is thy name? Supplanter. He said, thy name shall be called no more supplanter, but blessed, or prince of God. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. Jacob said, you asked me my name. What's your name? I can't tell you that. I can tell you, but I have to kill you, right? Why do you ask after my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel. All right, so this wrestling match takes place. And after this, now Jacob is ready to meet his brother Esau. All right, Esau and Jacob meet here. And by the way, he sends out in the front of the pack, Jacob sends out his least favorite wife. Well, he sends out some animals first, and then his least favorite wife. It's like he likes her a little bit more than the animals. It's bad testimony here. But anyway, the animals, and then Leah and part of her family. And then at the very back closest to him, of course, is his favorite wife and her family. And then himself at the back. Good old number one. It's hard to break old habits. But anyway, so he meets his brother here. And of course, they have peace. And Esau says, why don't you come down to my area? Edom is down in this area, just to the south of the Dead Sea, if you understand, straight across and south. Why don't you come down and meet me? I want to show you where we live. By the way, Edom is Mount Seir. It's red cliffs. This whole area down here is full of red cliffs. Okay, it's great. Have you ever heard of Petra? You ever seen pictures of Petra? Beautiful, absolutely unbelievable thing. City there, somewhere down here in Edom. I forget exactly where. You can take a trip. If you ever go to Israel, you can go there. We did not, but it's quite a few hour drive and so on down into the kind of rough area down there. But it's a city in the rocks. It's the entryway into the city itself literally is cliffs, and if you're on a horseback, your legs will rub at the same time on both sides as you enter in this entryway, and it's back and forth. It is impossible to get in there if somebody wants to keep you out with a gun or with a bunch of guns. So anyway, there's that, and then the buildings inside are literally built into the rocks. And so, of course, in the old days, this was a very secure place for banks and money and so on. It's probably one of the Nabatean cities of the different, the camel trade cities. It's one of the old trade cities, and this would have been one of the main places where they could keep money and keep it safe and so on. So anyway, this is a very interesting place down in Edom, and I don't know if he was there, but this is his entire area. So anyway, he invites Jacob down, and Jacob says, why don't you all go on ahead? We'll get down there. We'll meet you down there. As soon as Esau leaves, Jacob heads straight across into Shechem. And he doesn't go anywhere close to that, which has always been kind of an interesting thing there. Esau, verse 15, let me not leave with thee some of the folk that are with me. Oh, yes. I forgot that detail. You go ahead and I'll follow. And Esau says, I'll leave some people with you to show you the way. And Jacob says, no, that's okay. What needeth it? Let me find grace in the sight of my Lord. So Esau returned, and Jacob journeyed to Succoth. I'm out of here. He came to Shalem, a city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram and pitched his tent before the city. All right. So we see the determined wrestler and the results of that. Next, I want you to see the enraged father, Jacob. I'm going to give you two examples. One's found in chapter 34. The other is found in chapter 38. We're going to combine those two together because of what happens in chapter 38. I'll get to that. But the first thing I'm going to use, I'll take a little bit of liberty here, and we're going to say that Jacob was upset about these things. We know in chapter 34 he was upset. He was upset because of how it made him look. He was angry about what happens here at Shechem and his daughter Dinah, because it made their family look bad in the land, not because somebody had violated his own daughter. So, first of all, he was angry about the sin of murder committed by Levi and Simeon. And by the way, this stain on Levi and Simeon, it lasted for a long time. It lasted the rest of their life. Chapter 34. Without going through the details of this, let me just kind of touch on the highlights. Jacob allowed his daughter Dinah to pretty much run loose in the city of Shechem. And the Canaanites are evil, evil people. Fornicators, like unbelievable. Their gods, their worship system just pushes this. And so he allowed his daughter to run loose in a wicked Canaanite city. Chapter 38, we'll see this again, that's just common. Prostitution and so on like that is common in the land of Canaan. So what do you do in letting your daughter run loose? Well, the king of Shechem, his son, whose name is Shechem, I believe. Yes. His son seduces Dinah, improper relations, and so now Dinah comes back. She's been violated, and Shechem wants to marry her. I want to marry. And for the first time, no, it's not the first time in the Bible, but one of the first times in the Bible, where we see this idea of, let's intermarry. Why can't we just marry amongst our families and everything will be okay? Let me find the passage for that. Verse 9, chapter 34, verse 9. Make ye marriages with us. Verse 8, the end of the verse. I pray you give him to wife. Why don't you live with us? The land is before you. Dwell and trade therein. Get your possessions therein. Live with us. Marry with us. Now this isn't the first time. In Genesis chapter 6, the sons of God intermarried with the daughters of men. But later on, you'll find many other examples of that. One was with Balaam, encouraging them to intermarry and so on. That always brought trouble. Always brought trouble. I like Nehemiah's response to it. When they intermarried and he came back from Babylon and found out that they had intermarried, he went through and made some hay. Pulling people by the beards. He took care of business. If they were married and had children, he made them divorce and split up and threw out the foreigners. That was his response to it. I'm not saying that was, I'm sure there was probably things he did wrong there, but still, that was his response to it. Very, very harsh. So anyway, back to this story. Make ye marriages with us. That always is a bad idea for Christians to give into that. Don't let your tolerance level give in to something like that. That's what we heard preached pretty much last night, where you allow these things. You abandon your own faith to have peace. Anyway, so Dinah's brothers, at first, they told their dad, sure, let's tell them that we'll go ahead and do this. We'll go along with this idea. Sounds like a good idea. Verse 13, sons of Jacob answered deceitfully and said, sure, that sounds like a good idea. So, of course, first thing they're going to do is they're going to literally circumcise all of the people of Shechem, the men of Shechem, so in order for us to fit together. Hey, we're all brothers. We'll act like you're Jews. And so, of course, while they're wounded, Levi and Simeon, verses 25 through 30, go into the camp, into the city, and plunder the city and take all the spoil. Kill all the men. And Jacob was furious about it. Look at verse 30. What does Jacob respond to this? Ye have troubled me to make me to stink. among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and I being few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me and slay me, and I shall be destroyed, I and my house. Wonder who Jacob is worried about. Is he concerned about his daughter? It doesn't seem like it. Me, my family, I'm going to be suffering. He's worried about himself. So the anger here of Jacob. But secondly, let's look at chapter 38 now. Jacob's name is actually not mentioned here in this story, but I can just imagine that Jacob is very upset about this. And I'll take a little bit of liberty to say that he's angry about this. And this is over the sin of adultery. In chapter 34, it was the murder that Levi and Simeon committed, which I said that they never outlived that. They always suffered the stain of that. We find that in Genesis chapter 49, where Jacob rebuked them again, many, many, many years later for what they had done. But here it's the sin of adultery. So, again, without going too much detail, because it gets kind of disgusting, and it again shows the wickedness of the land of Canaan. I mean, disgusting, wicked sin. Judah marries, in chapter 38, verses 1 through 5, he marries a Canaanite woman. Can't we figure out that it never works to intermarry with, not foreigners, in the sense that somebody is a foreigner, but someone who worships a different god? That does not work. So Dinah and Shechem was an example of that. Here Judah and this Canaanite woman named Tamar. Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua. He took her and went in into her. I'm sorry. It doesn't give us her name as Tamar. That's his daughter. His son's wife's name was Tamar. So that's a different one. I got ahead of myself. But he marries a Canaanite woman. This Canaanite girl bears him 3 sons. You don't have to know these names. I'm not going to ask you for these, but Onan, and Shelah. I don't know how to say it, but those are the 3 names. Over time, and the funny thing is takes a long time for all of this to develop. There's 20 years probably at least go by in chapter 38 alone. So it's a big picture of something that happened over a long period of time. The oldest son, marries a girl named Tamar. And doesn't tell us why, but God killed him. He was wicked. Verse 7 says, he was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord slew him. So Judah said to the second son, hey, you need to marry your brother's wife and raise up seed to your brother. So Onan does that, but he also was wicked. And so the Lord killed him, verse 10, wherefore he slew him also. Verse 11, then said Judah to Tamar, remain a widow at thy father's house, and when the third son is older, then you can marry him, and he'll have a son to the first brother, Weird. So, as Tamar is getting older, and Shelah is getting older, she realized that Judah's not going to give Shelah to her, because Judah's pretty much written her off. And so she takes on her old ways, becomes a prostitute, goes out there, and Judah himself walks by and goes into her tent. Unbelievable. Judah himself walks in there, and before he leaves, she says, why don't you give me some, how did they call that? What pledge shall I give thee? And he said, I will send thee a kid from the flock. You're going to send me a kid from the flock to take care of me. Oh, I can do that. I got lots of animals and lots of flocks and herds. And she said, what if you don't send it? Can you give me something in the meantime to pledge that you will send that as payment for their wickedness? He says, okay, I'll give you the signet and the bracelets and the staff in my hand. And sure enough, 3 months later, Judah finds out that his own daughter-in-law is expecting. And he knew she was a widow, and he said, put that girl to death. And she brought out the signet and the bracelets and the staff and said, Who does this belong to? This is what I was given as a pledge. Can you imagine Judah here? I mean, caught red-handed. And so now he puts her away. Well, she has 2 children. Perez, which is Pharez, and listed in other places. Perez and, I have the names here. Oh, here we go. Zerah. And believe it or not, in Matthew chapter 1, in the lineage of Jesus Christ, in Matthew chapter 1, verse number 3, Judas begat Pharez and Zerah of Tamar, his own daughter-in-law. And Pharez begat Ezram, and Ezram begat Aram. Guess what? The line of Christ comes through Judah and Tamar, his daughter-in-law, through Pharez. All right. You think Jacob was upset about that? I would imagine so. Even though his name is not actually mentioned there. Okay. By the way, as disgusting as that is, God's goodness, God's grace is always available and evident. And for this reason alone, when people talk about abortion, and if abortion should be legal in the case of rape or incest or something like that, it's never right to kill a baby. It's never right. And as difficult, as awful as a situation like that is, it doesn't change the fact that God's grace is still available to people who go through that. And if you don't believe that, as a Christian, you have to believe that. All things work together for good. All things. And so, anyway, that's a side note, but still, this is the story of chapter 38. Now, let me put this in perspective a little bit. We've seen 2 examples, chapter 34 and chapter 38, of Canaanites intermarrying with the family of Jacob, or trying to in chapter 34, and the awful results of that. The influences of the Canaanites on the children of Jacob already. And I really believe that that's why, one of the reasons why God moved Jacob's family out of the land of Canaan. Because they were going to fall. They were going to intermarry. It was going to be really difficult. He moved them down to the land of Egypt, where the Egyptians would not allow them to intermarry. The Egyptians gave them their own property, Goshen, and they hated them as a whole. Stay in your area. Y'all have sheep. We don't want your sheep around us. So Egyptians stayed away from their family, whereas the Canaanites were more than happy to intermarry these rich people coming into the land of Canaan. So understand that. I think that's the big picture of why God, I've often wondered, why in the world is chapter 38 in the Bible of Genesis? Why is that story there? It's a long story that somewhere it fits in, who knows where exactly. Well, I think that's why. They were intermarrying with the Canaanites, and so God moved them out of the land of Canaan for a while. Okay, that brings us then to chapter 35, the obedient saint, the obedient patriarch. Jacob comes to Bethel, chapter 35, verses 1 through 7. Jacob finally, after 20 years of being gone, he comes back to Bethel. God said unto Jacob, arise, go up to Bethel. Now this is right after what happened at Shechem. And so Jacob obeys the Lord. The Lord says, Jacob, you need to get to Bethel. You need to get back to Bethel. And so Jacob comes back to Bethel. And he cleans house, gets rid of any false idols. They had evidently still the household gods. Get rid of everything and let's clean this place up. And they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon them. I missed it. We're going to make an altar. Verse 7, that's what I'm looking for. He built there an altar and called the place El Bethel. the God of the house of God. Not just the house of God. This isn't just the house of God. This is, I'm meeting again the God of the house. It's one thing as young people to go to church, and it's your parents' church. But when you grow older, it becomes your church. And it's my family's church. It's my God. It's my God I'm worshiping. The God of the house. This is, I think, Jacob, he realizes the mess. Imagine this, the mess that he got himself into. I got in huge trouble with my brother and my mom and my dad. I left home and I got over there and I thought I was going to accomplish some things, and I ended up with 4 wives, 12 sons, all kinds of problems, bitterness and hatred flying everywhere. Come back and my brother kind of makes peace, but we know that this isn't resolved. Come to Shechem and this happens. I need to get to Bethel. Man, I've done nothing but make a mess of my life. He comes to God. I believe he meets God again here, the God of the house of God. So this obedience is coming back to Bethel. That's the point. Next, the sorrowing saint. The sorrowing saint. He loses 3 loved ones in pretty close succession. The first is in 35:8. Deborah. She apparently was living with Jacob after the death of Rebekah. Sometime in there, Rebekah had died. And didn't look at the timing of this, but his mother had died, and probably she had come to live with them. We don't know exactly how that happened. Secondly, we also see that his wife, Jacob's wife, Rachel, she dies while she's giving birth to Benoni. Well, when his wife died, evidently she named him first, and then when she died, Jacob named his son something else. Benjamin, not Benoni. Verse 17, came to pass, and she was in hard labor. The midwife said, "Fear not, thou shalt have this son also." It came to pass, as her soul was in departing, for she died, that she called his name Benoni, but his father called him Benjamin, son of my right hand. So Rachel died. And then also in this chapter, his father Isaac died, and they buried him in the cave of Machpelah at Hebron. All right, yes.
Didn't Deborah go with him whenever he left?
Either with him or then she came to him later. So those are the two possibilities. Earlier, I think I mentioned that she probably came with him. But there's actually another possibility that she just came to him after her mistress died, Jacob's mother. There's not mention that she came with her. We're trying to figure out where she came from, and those are 2 good possibilities. Yes?
What was the point before the sorrowing saint?
The obedient patriarch, obedient saint, whatever you want to call it. His obedience. Genesis, remember, it's the book of first mentions. So let me give you 2 more here in this chapter. First mentions. In chapter 35, verse 14, there's the first mention of a drink offering. Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he talked with him, even a pillar of stone. He poured a drink offering thereon, and he poured oil thereon. A drink offering. I don't have anything huge, really, a nugget of wisdom or anything, but that's a first mention in the Bible. Also, there's a first mention in chapter 35, verse 19, of a place. In the old days, at the time of Jacob, it was called Ephrath. Ephrath. E-P-H-R-A-T-H. And someone, maybe it was Hort, West. No, I'm kidding. Someone, though, probably a later scribe, identified Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. It's the first mention of Bethlehem in the Bible. Can you picture as he's coming from Shechem? He'd have come down here right past Jerusalem. He's following probably the valleys. And I can just imagine he came right through the Kidron Valley. And on his way down, he comes down to Ephrath, Bethlehem. What does Micah 5:2 say? But thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, Ephrath, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah. So, Bethlehem Ephrath. This is the place, of course, where Jesus would later be born. All right, that's the end of the story of Joseph. That's the end of our focus. Not the end of the story. That's the end of our focus on Jacob. And now we're going to move to Joseph. And Joseph will take the rest of the way. Chapter 37 and then 39 through chapter 50. Now, I like covering the life of Joseph much, much more than the life of Jacob. Whew. Jacob had too many problems. Gets me all depressed. But Joseph, on the other hand, his beginning, what if you had to read, and for the first time in your life, you had to read the story of Joseph? As you read the first few chapters of the book, man, you would be really depressed, wouldn't you? This guy can't do anything right. Everything he does, he ends up in more trouble. But the reason the story of Joseph is so good is because we know the end of the story, right? And how low can you go, and then how high can you go? So we know the story, and it's a great one. The biggest thrill I get out of any Bible story is when Joseph reveals himself to his brothers. That is the ultimate shocker. If you can just picture yourself, put yourself into a fly on the wall watching that happen. The fly probably had tears coming out of its eyes, It is a great one. The Count of Monte Cristo, something along those lines, when he reveals himself. Oh man, it is great. So let's look at the story of the life of Joseph. It doesn't start out so well, does it? So I've got a lot of points, again, that we'll go through about Joseph. We'll set it up the same way as we did with Jacob. So if you want to start a new outline, that's fine with me. Remember that this is the fourth of the main sections, I should say, of chapters 12 through 50 in Genesis. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. Bless you. So here we see Joseph in chapter 37 first. We're going to see him as the favored son. The favored son. All right, why is he the favorite son? He's Rachel's son. He's the oldest of Rachel's sons. So that's pretty obvious. And he had a better attitude than any of his brothers. Right? Maybe. He was a little proud of himself. A little pious. But he had by far the best. When his dad told him to do something, he just did it. Whereas the other brothers are all, they're killing people, and they're taking Canaanite prostitutes. Okay? They're pretty bad. Joseph is young, but he seems to have a different attitude. And when you get Joseph down to Egypt, his attitude just shines. He's in Potiphar's house as a slave, and it absolutely just shines. We see him, though, as the favored son. Let me mention a couple things about this story of him as the favored son. We see first the dreams of Joseph. All right, Joseph had some dreams, and he brought the wrath of his 10 half-brothers. They're all half-brothers to Joseph, except for Benjamin. And what did he do in these dreams? He didn't really do a lot, he didn't really do a lot wrong. He just told his brothers. Your words can get you in a lot of trouble. Whether or not Joseph repeated to his brothers what God had showed him. By the way, these dreams were true. There's no question about it. God showed him these dreams as prophetic dreams, what was going to happen in the life of Joseph. So if Joseph doesn't say a word about it, he's going to have these things come to pass anyway. But Joseph speaks out. Now, what if he hadn't spoken out? Then he wouldn't have been hated by his brothers so much. And they probably wouldn't have sold him into Egypt. And all of the dreams being fulfilled probably wouldn't have happened. So God's providence is always working. But Joseph here speaks out where he probably wouldn't have had to and probably shouldn't have for his own sake. He reported also, we see, he reported to his father the bad things his brothers were doing. Oh, that'll get you in trouble every time with your brothers. Chapter 37, verse 2. End of the verse. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. He was with, who is he with? The lads were with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wife. All right, let's see here. Who are his half-brothers from Zilpah and Bilhah? It's Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And Joseph was a little tattletale, telling on his big brothers. Here again, you big brothers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh my goodness. Well, you're not a big brother. You're just the oldest in the family. The only one, right? So, all right. So anyway, you oldest ones, we don't like y'all. We tell on you every chance we get. So, very good. All right, he reported to his father. That's one reason they hated him. Also because he told them his dreams. That's another reason they hated him. But a third reason they hated him was because of how his father played favorites and gave him a coat of many colors. Of course, this coat wasn't just a coat. It wasn't a special coat because it had a North Face brand on it or anything like that. It was much more special in that it signified that he was the favorite son. I mean, this is much more than, one kid has a name brand coat and everybody else has to wear hand-me-downs, from Goodwill that say, made in China on them. This is a coat of many colors signifying that he was the favorite son. There was much, much more effort and work put into this coat of many colors than their bland, normal clothing made of wool or made of whatever other kind of animal skins, leather. It could be a lot of things that it was made of. But this coat was brightly colored and very special. Anywhere he went, people said, wow, this is the favorite son. Everybody understood that. So Joseph tells them his dreams. Of course, you know the stories. In one of his dreams, they're all in the field binding sheaves. And suddenly his sheaf stands up and all their sheaves gather around it and bow down before the sheaves. And then he has another dream and he tells them again. It's just ridiculous. If he'd have just stopped after the first one, learned his lesson. But he doesn't. He tells them again. He saw the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bow low before him. Well, now he's targeted as the dreamer and as the one that his brothers hate. All right, so in the midst of this dreaming and so on, in the midst of this, Joseph is sent from home to Shechem to check on his half-brothers and their grazing flocks. Look at chapter 37, verse number 12. And his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. Does it strike you as odd? Excuse me. Shechem. What are they doing in Shechem? I thought the men of Shechem, which were all dead, I thought the people of Shechem hated them. I thought the people around Shechem hated them. You make me to stink in the eyes of the inhabitants of this land. What's he doing back up there? Evidently, there was good grazing up there. I mean, they were determined to go back. But I also wonder if these brothers are going up there, they're not the completely innocent party over here saying, yeah, Joseph shouldn't be bragging. I think they're also going back up there to gloat a little bit. Look around and say, we can go anywhere we want. If we want to come to Shechem, we come to Shechem. And they didn't just go there. They went on over from there, even beyond that, to Dothan. Of course, Joseph goes along to find them. See whether it be well with thee. He came out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem, and a certain man found him. Behold, he was wandering in the field, and the man asked him, saying, What seekest thou? I seek my brethren. Verse 19. As they see him coming, they conspire against him to slay him. They say one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. All right, let me finish this chapter real quickly before I run out of time here. Secondly, not only the dreams of Joseph, but secondly, the deceit of his brothers. So the next thing I have under the favored son, Joseph, of chapter 37. The deceit of his brothers. The 10 brothers see him in the distance and determined to kill him. Can you imagine? I don't know. I didn't get along with my brothers all the time, but I don't think I ever thought about killing them. Maybe, but I don't think so. They said, let's kill him. They conspired against him to slay him. In the middle of that, Reuben, the firstborn, the oldest, has second thoughts and says, hey, why don't we just throw him in a pit and let him die? And then, of course, he said, when everybody's gone, then I'll come back. His big brother, Rick, can you imagine? Your little brothers, your younger brothers say, let's kill our youngest brother. And you don't have the guts to speak up and say, no, we're not going to kill him. Instead, you say, hey, let's throw him in a pit. Yeah, let's get rid of him. And then you're secretly saying, well, when they leave, I'm going to sneak out at night. When they're watching the sheep, I'm going to sneak out at night and come back and rescue him. And I'm going to run him home to Dad real quick. I mean, what good is that going to do? Because the next time you're alone with your brothers again, they're going to get you now. You're going to be the target. You know, I don't get this. He's the oldest brother. Why don't you just speak up and be a big brother? I know my oldest brother. He always spoke his mind. Too much. He spoke his mind. He said, no, this is what we're going to do. And then we'd challenge him, and he'd have to prove that he's still the big brother. I mean, I don't get this. But Reuben, hey, let's put him in this pit. And then he's secretly going to take him back to Dad. Oh, my goodness. So Reuben, Joseph is stripped of his coat then and cast into the pit. Chapter 37, verse 24. They took him and cast him in the pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. In Genesis 42, when after they're down in Egypt, and the brothers come down there in the famine looking for food, in Genesis 42, verse 21, the Bible says that they're talking quietly in the prison. Not in the prison, sorry. They're talking quietly amongst themselves in front of Joseph, who they don't know is Joseph. And they said one to another, we are verily guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul. We saw him down in the pit in anguish when he besought us, and we would not hear. Maybe it's after they pulled him out and they're selling him to the Ishmaelites, and he's being dragged away, and there they saw the anguish of his soul. He besought us, and we would not hear. So we do know that Joseph spoke out. He begged them not to do this. He begged them not to sell him. He begged them to let him live. The cruel brothers ignored him. Man, oh man. Guess who's the leader in this deal with the Ishmaelites? Here they see, by the way, they sit down to eat after they throw him in jail. Yeah, we got our little brother. You know, he's about 17 years old. He is 17. Chapter 37, verse 2 tells us. Yeah, we got him. We're 24. The oldest is about 24, by the way. Think of it. They're all in their 20s, down to Joseph, who's 17. We got him. And so now they sit down to eat. These guys are calloused. You just conspired to kill your brother. You threw him in the pit, ready to get rid of him and leave him there. And you sit down and you eat like nothing happened. And then here comes some Ishmaelites, and they decide to sell him to the Ishmaelites. Hey, we might as well get something out of this kid. He'd probably be, sell for some money. Let's get rid of him. And so they make this deal. Judah is the ringleader. I don't know where Reuben is. It seems like for some reason Reuben had left. So maybe he was out with the sheep, or I don't know. But he doesn't seem to be there, or he would have spoke out. He comes back later and finds the pit empty. So somehow Reuben wasn't there. Judah makes this deal, because later on we find Judah admitting that he made the deal. So anyway, they take Joseph and they sell him for 20 pieces of silver, and he was carried, of course, down into Egypt. They take the coat of many colors. Oh boy, here's Joseph reaping. Joseph reaping. His sons deceive him. And how did they deceive him? With the clothing of Joseph. How was Jacob? How did he deceive his father? With that skin, the skins that he wrapped around his arms and his neck. And so they bring this coat of many colors, and they killed, verse 31, a kid of the goats. They killed a kid. Unbelievable. That's a goat, by the way. They killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in the blood, and they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, "This have we found. Is this your son's coat?" Whew, these guys are callous. Man, they're hard. They're 20-something years old. How old are you, Rick?
22, almost
22. They're 20. The oldest 24, 25. Hey, we found this. You recognize this coat? I mean, to their own dad. I mean, and then he's rending his clothes and putting sackcloth on his loins, mourning for his son many days, the Bible says. I mean, his father wept for him. And they couldn't go back. They knew that they couldn't say, actually, you know what, we do. They obviously feel bad because later when they go down to Egypt, they start to, boil over and say, man, we've been bearing the strain of this for years. We know we killed our brother. This is why all these bad things are happening. They're guilty as can be. And they look at their father, old father, just weeping, and they won't tell him. These are some callous boys. All right, the third thing then was the despair of the father. And I already mentioned that to you. Jacob, who once deceived his father by using the skin of a kid, a goat, is himself now deceived using the goat, the kid, the blood of the goat. All right. We'll stop there for today, and we'll pick up the next class period, chapter 39. Joseph coming down to Egypt.